So back in the summer of 2024, if you were a creative professional, your social feeds probably blew up with some serious anger. And it was all aimed at one company, Adobe. And look, this wasn't just some bug fix or a price hike. This was a full-blown crisis of trust. And it was all about AI, privacy, and the huge question of who really owns your creative work.
And get this, that quote you're looking at, that's not from a competitor. It's not from some angry customer on Twitter. That was shared by an Adobe employee inside the company's own Slack channels. That's just how bad the trust problem had gotten, even on the inside.
So how in the world did we get here? Well, like a lot of modern-day controversies, this whole thing started with something that seemed pretty boring, a routine update to the company's terms of service, a tiny little pop-up that ended up having absolutely massive consequences.
So if you were using Photoshop or Substance Painter or really any of their apps, you got hit with this notice, and you had no choice. You literally couldn't use the software you were paying for unless you clicked Accept. But buried deep in all that legal jargon was a sentence that set off a 5-alarm fire across the entire creative world.
For any artist reading this, that language was just way too vague. It didn't sound like a standard update. It sounded like Adobe was giving itself a free pass to access everything they created, from the first rough sketch to the final polished project.
And the reaction from the community was anything but routine. It was fast, it was furious, and it really tapped into this deep-seated anxiety artists have about privacy, about ownership, and of course, about the massive shadow of generative AI.
The fears were really specific, Artists working on top-secret projects for huge clients suddenly started panicking. Could these new terms actually make them violate their non-disclosure agreements? But the biggest fear, the one that united everyone, was that their life's work was about to become free training data for Adobe's AI.
And this headline from Mashable, it just perfectly captured what everyone was feeling. This wasn't some philosophical question anymore. It felt like a very real threat to every single creative professional who depends on Adobe's tools to make a living. And this thing went viral, like instantly. A single tweet that broke down the new terms got over 5 million views. All of a sudden, the hashtag cancel Adobe was absolutely everywhere. It was this incredible display of just how fast the online creative community can come together.
The anger wasn't just coming from the outside either. Leaked internal messages showed that employees were just as frustrated. They were complaining about the company's terrible communication and worrying that Adobe was turning into this out-of-touch giant, just coasting on its monopoly.
Okay, so with its reputation in a total freefall, Adobe had to do something, and fast. The company scrambled to control the narrative, clarify its policies, and, most importantly, rewrite the exact terms that started the whole crisis in the first place.
And guess what? The public pressure actually worked. Adobe was forced to swap out all that vague legal speak for some crystal-clear, legally binding promises. The new terms were totally unambiguous. You own your content, and, crucially, it will not be used to train their generative AI. Period.
And to try and win back some of that lost trust, Adobe pushed forward a new feature. It's a tool that lets creators embed a Do Not Train tag right into their artwork's metadata. Think of it like a digital hands-off sign that directly addresses the community's biggest fear. But here's the thing, that old terms of service mess, that was just the tip of the iceberg. All of this intense public scrutiny opened up a whole other can of worms about how Adobe's AI models, like Firefly, were actually built to begin with. So you know how Adobe was marketing Firefly as this ethically built AI trained on its own stock image library? Well, it turns out that about 5% of its training data actually came from AI-generated images made with tools like Midjourney, the very same platform artists were already accusing of being built on copyright infringement. Not a great look.
And this brings us to this really fascinating new legal idea that's at the center of a class action lawsuit against Adobe. The argument is actually pretty simple. You can't just wash your hands of copyright infringement by using someone else's dataset. You inherit the risk. It's kind of like buying stolen goods. Even if you didn't steal them yourself, you're still in trouble.
Okay, so check out this alleged data trail from the lawsuit. The claim is that Adobe's language model was trained on a data set that came from another set, which in turn used something called Books 3, a notorious massive collection of pirated books. So the lawsuit is basically tracing the data all the way back to an act of mass piracy.
So this whole mess did a lot more than just damage Adobe's reputation for a bit. It has forced a really critical conversation,
and has basically drawn a clear line in the sand for the entire future of creative software.
You've got this clear fork in the road now. On one side, you have Adobe, which is doubling down on AI integration, all while trying to brand itself as a responsible leader. And then on the other side, you have companies like Procreate, whose CEO came right out and said generative AI is built on a foundation of theft and promised they are never going there.
The immediate fire might be out, but the questions this whole thing raised are honestly more urgent than ever. As generative AI gets woven deeper and deeper into the digital tools we use every single day, we all have to ask ourselves, who really gets to write the terms? The people making the art or the platforms that own the canvas?